Hi, everyone. Um, I've been asked to follow up my lecture on ethics. I believe that Gary will have showed the previous talk that I gave on ethics that we used a few months ago. My understanding that that'll be a refresher for some, but maybe new for others. And so this is just a follow-up and maybe a little more in-depth into some relevant issues uh, that may encounter during this study, and just to continue to engage in that discussion and think about how ethics applies to this research setting. So what are ethics? What does it mean to act ethically? Can you provide some examples? Um, I think Gary might pause here and lead a discussion on that. And then once he's ready, we come back and I can provide you sort of a textbook definition and then get into our little bit of review, some highlights, and then some specific issues relative to TPO. So I'll just pause for a minute for that, for Gary to do that. So ethics are moral principles that governs a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity, in this case, a research activity, right? And you have ethics and protection, right? So, sorry, it's my kids in the background. It's important that this study, this data collection, and the evaluation of journey of life must follow strong research ethics and protection principles. So what are some ethical practices that an evaluation must follow based on, what you went over last time? What were some of the main ethics issues that came up? Again, I'm gonna pause and let Gary lead a discussion, and then I'll sort of dive into what we think we want to highlight in a minute. So I think we want to come away and are saying that in terms of ethics and protection and thinking about applied research ethics, the three pillars really are confidentiality, which is the information and participation will be kept private, right? Well, the information that participants share, what we learn about, will remain private, won't be shared with others. That there's voluntariness, right? That participation is voluntary. And if a participant refuses to participate, they will not be in trouble or lose benefits in any way, right? There should be no pressure on them to participate. And then lastly, informed consent, right? That participants know the risks and benefits of doing the evaluation activities. And we went over those in the last lecture. So I just want to clarify some information about misconceptions about the benefits of a research study. So informants must understand that participation in the study is not meant to benefit them directly, right? And they need to be made aware of any potential risks. And I think in this case, really loss of confidentiality is the greatest, right? And so in terms of benefits that informants can expect, right? It's mainly that the journey of life intervention, right? They're for participating in the study, they'll be the recipients of the journey of life intervention, right? And that information could benefit them directly, or it could benefit their community and others, right? But the information, I think that, it's not like an immediate benefit, right? I wouldn't think about it as that, they're not gonna know, did like journey of life improve your life, but it'll let us know that it'll provide evidence as to whether or not it could be used in other settings to improve people's lives, right? And then study interviewers should make it clear that they're not healthcare providers, right? You're not trained as such. You might have some information about health that you want to share, but you're not really there to give healthcare advice and not meant to be viewed as that. So it's important to clarify that that's not your training and not your role. And if there are healthcare related questions that come up, those should be referred to the site counselors. And I'm sure Gary can let you know who those people are, right? But sometimes that comes up in research or part of an organization like TPO or part of a study that's about psychosocial support or mental health, and people assume that you're trained in that way. And in many cases, I imagine you're not, right? And so you don't have to go out of your comfort zone. You can just explain to them that that's not your training. You're here to collect data, to ask them questions about from a survey, and that, you know, healthcare related questions can be referred to other people with knowledge in that area. So what do you think are some key qualities for ethical researchers? And again, I think we're gonna, you know, if there's time, have Gary pause and have you guys sort of list in your mind what you think are key qualities, and then I'll review those. So again, I'll just pause for another minute for that to happen. So the key qualities that we've listed are integrity, right? Being honest and forthright, right? About what the study is, what all the guidelines are, right? There's no tricks or reveals, right? It's very straightforward, you know. You want to be respectful, you know. I imagine, in many times going into these people's homes in their community, you want to, you know, demonstrate that you appreciate them participating in the study and allowing us to do this. Compassion, right? Many people probably have had challenging experiences. And always be professional, right? You represent TPO in this capacity, as well as, you know, its partners, Washington University, St. Louis. And I think you just want to, you know, do your best to be professional and behave in a courteous way to the participants, and also to be sensitive, right? Sensitive to your surroundings, sensitive to the issues that people are sharing. And if you don't follow ethical and professional research conduct, you can actually put participants at unneeded risk. So that's why these rules are important, and it's important to think through, what does this mean? Like what does it mean to be and to have integrity as an interviewer, as a research assistant, or as a translator? How should you be respectful, right? And those could vary, you know, and you could even talk about that, right? Like my understanding of what's respectful of going in someone's home could be very different from what you're used to, you know, and it's just important to remember that a lot of these things aren't just, you know, what's respectful is something that's negotiated and determined, and certain things can be considered disrespectful by others. So to be sensitive to that, I think, is important. So the third key of that was obtaining informed consent or assent, right? We just want to remind you that facilitators should conduct consent assent procedures with participants or caregivers in each research activity before beginning, right? Like you can't, like, it's the end of the interview, oh, I forgot to do this, can we fill it out real fast? You know, it needs to be done beforehand. It's an opportunity to explain the study, to prepare them, to let them know everything. You know, if anything, it should answer a lot of their questions, right? But also it gives them time to answer questions afterwards. So it's important to go through that. And even I know from my own experience, by the time you've gone through these many, many times, you can go through them quickly, and you might pick up where people often have questions. You can start to, you know, be more prepared how to answer them, or know who to talk to about answering them. But it's so important to give everyone the time, because for everyone, almost always, it's going to be their first time hearing this. Um, and you also must obtain explicit consent and assent to record any research activities and to take photos. You know, I know it's an evolving situation with how the interviews will be conducted and doing things virtually versus in person, but just remember that's an important rule. And what other information should be shared as part of informed consent and assent, right? There's the actual form, but there's other things that you can just communicate, you know, that there are no right or wrong answers to the questions, right? They shouldn't feel pressured to say a certain thing that they think you want to hear, or that you don't want to hear, right? You're not, and that's why it's important you're professional and let them know that you're not there to judge them, or that you will judge them, or that they have to be worried about others finding it out, right? And you can share information about the purpose of the evaluation, right? They should know what the study is about and why they're participating in it, and what that information will go towards, right? And how could it could be used to improve programs like this, right? So you want to share information about referral pathways, like how they can be referred for additional support if they need it. And make sure to include time for participants to ask questions, right? And give that contact information if there are follow-up questions or concerns afterwards, right? You won't be in trouble for it. It's not like it was your fault that they decided not to participate or anything. Just important that they know, and that's part of, you know, doing things ethically. So why should we take special care to ensure ethics and protection when collecting data or conducting research with people affected by a humanitarian emergency? I'm actually going to let you guys think about that for 1 minute, because I need a drink of water. Okay, and maybe you can come up with some ideas. Sorry about that, Gary. Maybe you, if you guys are deep in discussion, pause and carry on, and then I'll, you know, come up with some of what we think's, you know, reasons why there should be some special care. So, as many of you may know, or probably know, displacement as a result of a conflict or disaster may lead to other certain negative repercussions, right? Increase in poverty, dependency, powerlessness, among others. Uncertainty in access to an unequal distribution of resources, sometimes as basic as food, shelter, material goods, that can put affected individuals, especially those most vulnerable, women and girls, at a greater risk of violence and sexual exploitation and abuse, right? So we need to take extra care, right? Knowing that this is a vulnerable population. And there are certain protection policies, right, in place, and that TPO has, in order to prevent sexual exploitation and abuse, and in order to safeguard children. So what is sexual exploitation and abuse? Again, Gary, if you want, feel free to pause and ask. Otherwise, I'll provide a definition. So sexual exploitation is taking advantage of an unequal power relationship to obtain sexual favors in return for protection or assistance from a person in a vulnerable situation. And then sexual abuse is actual or threatened sexual violence obtained by force or under coercion. So engaging in any acts of exploitation and abuse is prohibited. Sexual activity of any kind with children, so persons under the age of 18, is not permitted, regardless of the local age of consent, right? So what could sexual exploitation and abuse look like? It could be trying to exchange money, shelter, firewood, or fuel for cooking, food, or others good for sex or sexual favors from someone in a vulnerable position, right? NGO staff, volunteers, or any person associated with the program demanding sexual acts in exchange for food, money, rations, food, firewood, other goods, employment, or other services, right? Threatening or forcing an individual to have sex or provide sexual favors under unequal or forced conditions. Those are all examples of what those that could play out like, right? And then sexual abuse, any unwelcome, usually repeated and unwanted sexual advance, unsolicited sexual attention, demand for sexual access or favors, sexual innuendo or other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature, display of pornographic material, inappropriate touching or gestures, and harassment by force or under unequal or coercive conditions is considered sexual abuse. So TPO is committed to ensuring that no harm, whether intentional or unintentional, comes to a child as a result of TPO projects, right? TPO has a zero tolerance policy regarding the abuse and exploitation of children. TPO workers, visitors, subgrantees, suppliers, subcontractors, and implementing partners are prohibited from engaging in any form of abuse or exploitation of children. So child safeguarding, a child is anyone under the age of 18 years, right? And TPO is committed to ensuring that no harm, whether intentional or unintentional, comes to children as a result of TPO projects. And harm refers to physical or psychological injury or damage to a child's health, survival, development, or dignity. So TPO representatives and partners are prohibited from engaging in any form of abuse or exploitation of children and required to report all suspicions and allegations, right? Um, and that's important, not are they not allowed to do it, but to report it if they're aware of it or if they're suspicious of it, right? So how do we define child abuse and exploitation? So any and all forms of physical and or emotional ill treatment, sexual abuse, neglect, or negligent treatment, or commercial or other exploitation resulting in actual or potential harm to the child's health, survival, development, or dignity in the context of a relationship of responsibility, trust, or power. So the child safeguarding policy prohibits physically punishing or disciplining a child, doing things for children of an intimate, personal nature that they can do for themselves, right? Acting in ways intended to shame, humiliate, belittle, or degrade children, or perpetrate any kind of emotional abuse, engaging in sexual activity with children, regardless of the local age of consent, using language or behavior around or towards children that is inappropriate, harassing, abusive, sexually provocative, or demeaning, inviting children into staff's homes, apartments, hotels, guest houses, etc., unless a supervisor has agreed it is necessary for the protection of the child, and sleeping in the same bed or room as a child beneficiary or participant. So, as with policies on prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse, policies on child safeguarding apply to you as data collectors and as partners with TPO. So the child safeguarding policy prohibits discriminating against, showing differential treatment, or favoring particular children to the exclusion of others, hiring children for domestic or other labor, which violates national labor laws, is inappropriate given their age or developmental stage, interferes with their education or recreational activities, or places them at significant risk or injury. Developing relationships with children that could in any way be deemed inappropriate, exploitative, or abusive, using any computers, mobile phones, video cameras, or social media to harass children, as well as accessing explicit images, materials, media of children through any medium. So obtaining informed assent from children and their caregivers before taking image of children and writing where possible, and children and caregivers should be informed of how the images will be used, as well as ensuring that images taken of children are accurate and respect their privacy and dignity. And then ensuring that any image or recording case history of a child does not place him or her at risk or render him or him vulnerable to any form of abuse. So again, this is really just a reminder that, you know, um, any violations of child safeguarding policies, allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse must be reported immediately. And really, the emphasis here is these are especially vulnerable individuals, right? They're in a humanitarian setting, or they may be children, women, and anything that you see or hear allegations of, must be reported, and you also they're prohibited from doing them yourselves. And this is important to remember. It's part of being an ethical um, person, and being professional is focusing on safeguarding the safety and minimizing risk of these participants. And just remember that, in this context, you're a professional, you're an employee of TPO, or working for them, and that's what's expected of you. So just a quick review, final, of these key ethical principles. We have do no harm, right? That's the main one. Of course, it should drive everything. Respect confidentiality. Do not conduct any activities without the explicit consent of the participant, right? Informed consent. Respect the rights of participants. Do not participate in the study or answer questions, and their right to leave or stop the activity at any time. And do not ask any questions regarding an individual's sensitive experiences, especially around violence, right? Um, and then questions. Gary, please lead a discussion. I'll be online later to answer some questions if there are any. Actually, about TPO policies and stuff, I'm not a TPO like direct staff member, so those probably aren't best for me, but anything about research and research ethics, I would be happy to have a discussion with you about or answer questions. And Flora will be on later after me. And I'm sure you can also ask Gary as well. He's great and a wealth of information. And then if there's time, I just came up with a few questions, hopefully another discussion. As I said, like ethics, you learn it, it's an interaction. It's not just a set of rules, do this, do that, it's an ongoing engagement. So, what do you think is the most important part of research ethics as it applies to the study or in general? What do you think will be the most difficult part of conducting this research from an ethical perspective? And then maybe you can each share one thing that you learned today that you weren't formally aware of, or identify things you'd like to learn more about or have more discussion about. And hopefully you all get a chance to do that now. All right, thank you very much. I'll see you all shortly.